Okay, everybody. So I had the request to make a final sort of overview video as we're getting ready for the final exam. Okay, folks. So generally, when we're talking about studying for a cumulative exam, I want to make sure that you're studying smart. The cumulative study guide is intended to be a way to focus your energy on the things that I really think are essential for you to know at the end of the semester from this class. And you really don't have to know everything. You just need to know the stuff that's on the list. So if it isn't on the list, don't study it. So really use the study guide to help shape what it is you're paying attention to, especially when it comes to that older material that we covered toward the beginning of the semester. It's just always a good move to come up with examples as you go. That helps reinforce it in your memory and will make it easier for you to remember later. I will say this new format is something that you're now a little bit more used to, and so you might have recognized a way that you took the exam this last time around and whether that was working or not, and you might have to modify that. Keep in mind, open book, open note can be a bit of a trap. Sometimes that means that you don't review as carefully because you think, oh, I can just look that up, and then it might spin your wheels a little looking up that information, especially when there's a lot to look up. So don't fall into that trap. Make sure you're reviewing really well. And as you're actually taking the exam, I would recommend you take notes on scrap paper as you go, especially if it's a longer exam, so you can go back through and check up on things as you go, rather than depending on your memory to recheck a question that you might have forgotten to answer. It's important to read each question thoroughly and all the answers. So now we're getting into the cumulative material from your study guide. So most of this stuff should be fairly straightforward. The key I'm looking for here is specificity. So for example, specific factors that could increase or decrease helping. If, for example, you're aware that it is a severe emergency, that's more likely to increase helping. The presence of others can decrease helping. So focus on specificity there and focus on the things that we talked about in lecture and covered in class. Some of you had a challenge with distinguishing between normative and informational social influence on exam 1, so you can believe I'm going to be covering it again. As a reminder, in both cases, people are influenced by others and change their behavior to do what the other people are doing, but the motives are different. So the motive for normative social influence is to fit in. The motive for informational social influence is to be correct. So people change their behavior to that of the groups in the case of informational social influence when they are uncertain of the correct answer and are depending on what the group is telling them. That uncertainty is key. In both cases, once again, people are changing their behavior to that of the group, but in one they're uncertain of the right answer, in the other they want to fit in. The Asch conformity study is an example of normative social influence because people were changing their answer from something they knew to be correct to something they knew to be incorrect with the goal of fitting in. There was no uncertainty about what the correct answer was, so that was not a case of informational social influence. It was a case of normative social influence. An example of informational social influence would be the Sharif autoconnect effect, where people were asked to estimate how much a laser beam was moving and depended very heavily on what their fellow group members estimated because it was ambiguous and uncertain. And then they internalized that answer as the correct one and accepted it as true because they were uncertain about what the answer was, so they depended on their group members. So keep that sort of thing in mind. Hopefully the rest of these should be fairly straightforward. And once again, I'm looking for specific factors. I'm looking for a limited number of theories for you to focus on. So hopefully that should narrow your focus and concentration a little bit when it comes to the cumulative portion of your exam. When it comes to attraction, don't forget the Helen Fisher talk. So as a reminder, dopamine is associated with risk-taking, reward-seeking, craving. Norepinephrine is associated with focus. And we see kind of all those things activate in people who are madly in love and in people who've just been dumped as a way to increase their potential risky behavior and their obsession with the person that they're in love with. It's easy to confuse Triandis' parental investment theory versus Rusbolt's investment model. Keep in mind that parental investment is about the difference in biology between biological males and females when it comes to carrying a fetus for 9 months and undergoing that potentially life-threatening procedure of giving birth, which is very tolling on the body, and then potentially having to once again be the primary source of nutrition and care for the newborn due to producing milk, and how that's just fundamentally different in terms of the amount of investment a person who's biologically female can expect to invest compared to someone who's biologically male. The investment model from Rusbolt is about the factors that can determine whether people will be in a successful long-term relationship. And once again, those key components are quality of available alternatives, satisfaction, and investment. So how much you've invested into the relationship. And all three of those things can be determinants of success in a long-term relationship. So make sure you don't get those confused. When it comes to cross-cultural psychology, keep in mind that when it comes to Marcus and Kitayama's reading, you don't necessarily need to know the whole thing. I want you to find 1 or 2 examples of specific research that can determine cultural differences as it relates to either cognition, emotion, or motivation. So pick one of those and find some really good examples that you can pull from that particular section. So narrow your focus and look at research about one of those 3 topics. And then also Marcus and Kitayama provide a really good definition of interpersonal and intrapersonal senses of self. It's also good to just reflect on the fact that individualism and collectivism can be determined culturally, but there are also factors that can shift people towards a more individualistic focus versus a collectivistic focus, like the number of choices that they have, the amount of power that they have, how loose or tight society is. So make sure that that's clear to you and let me know if you have any questions. When it comes to your Modern Trends long essay, here's some guidance in terms of what I'm expecting there. So this is going to be the equivalent to your long essays that you've had for exams 1 and 2. And with long essays, what you've been asked to do is you've been asked to answer questions that's about worth 7 points towards your final grade. And for those particular essays, I've asked you to go into more detail for your answer. In this particular case, a good length of an answer will be about 250 words. I want you to be prepared to integrate related research and theories in class, so I want you to connect your answer to other things we've talked about besides the Modern Trends research that you've taken a look at. I want you to be specific, so refer to specific parts of the video or specific parts of the reading that you took a look at for the modern theories. I want you to apply it, to think about applying it to things that you might have seen out in the real world or news stories you've read. And just to basically demonstrate that you've read that particular or listened to that particular section on Modern Trends and thought about the topic in depth. That's what I'm looking for in terms of your Modern Trends long essay, where I'm asking you to create your own essay question and answer it. Let me know if you have any questions about that.